member Sadiq Khan has won a second term as mayor, beating the Conservatives' Sean Bailey. He won 55.2% of the vote after entering a runoff with his rival. Neither managed to secure a majority in the first round of voting. In his conceding defeat speech, Sean Bailey gave this message to Sadiq Khan.
I hope you take this opportunity to focus on the fact that people who look like me are 4 times as likely to be murdered than people who look like you. I believe Mayor Khan stood for this position because he knows it's a powerful position, an opportunity to deliver for Londoners. So I hope he reflects on that opportunity, that responsibility, and doesn't blame everything on the government.
In Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon is piling on the pressure for another independence referendum after the SNP secured a 4th consecutive victory at Holyrood. But the party won 64 seats, 1 short of an overall majority. It means the First Minister will have to agree a deal with the Scottish Green Party, which also wants a so-called Indie Ref 2 in this parliamentary term. However, in Edinburgh, there are mixed views on the subject.
I voted SNP, but I'm not quite ready to go through the whole yes vote again. I think that tore a lot of the country apart. So the overall kind of thing happening in England is not really what Scotland wants, to have a Conservative government.
We just believe in different things.
The Prime Minister is inviting the First Ministers of Scotland and Wales to a union summit, believing working together is how best to serve the UK. He's congratulated the devolved leaders on their election results, but Nicola Sturgeon is warning Boris Johnson not to block another referendum on Scottish independence, saying it's the will of the country. 2 other headlines in brief this hour. Passengers using some of the country's busiest railway lines, Great Western and LNER, are being urged not to travel again today because of widespread delays and cancellations. Cracks were found on some Hitachi 800 carriages during routine safety checks yesterday. The Lord Speaker's Committee is recommending proposals to cap the House of Lords to 600 members and that it should be written into law. Its chairman, Lord Burns, says a voluntary approach is no longer working, given the recent decision to take membership beyond the 800 mark. The weather, cloud and rain across central parts of England. Elsewhere, sunshine and showers, some heavy in the west with a risk of thunder in the southeast, a high of 19 degrees. From Global's newsroom, I'm Philip Chrysikos.
When you're serving Joe Frazee, but your drink choice is lazy.
Let that be fruit.
Wait, who are you?
I'm just a kid interrupting a family dinner with a fruity bottle of Robinsons.
Oh, okay. Where were we? When you're trying to learn French, but your thirst is unquenched.
Let there be fruit.
When you're out living life with the sun beaming down, or you're dancing to the radio and there's nothing zesty to be found. When your water tastes like, water.
Let there be fruit. Liven up your water with Robinsons.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Andrew Castle.
Well, I might as well start with a text this morning. Why didn't you include good news for Labour in Wales when listing the party's headline results? Well done, Mark Drakeford, First Minister of Wales. There you go. Listen, when you text, put your name on it so we can have a proper chat and we can know who you are. And yeah, you can get in touch. 0345 6060 973. We're talking about the fallout for Labour. Angela Rayner has been sacked as Labour chair after this Hartlepool by-election loss, and so much more besides. Now, the thing about it is, she's not just party chair; she's national campaign coordinator, and they've just suffered, a really sort of humiliating day in elections across the board. Now, of course, there are notable highs as well. A report on Sadiq Khan in just a second. But let me ask you this question. Does it look like Sir Keir Starmer is taking responsibility? You all heard the soundbite the other day, and we'll play it again in just a second. But does it look like Mr. Starmer's taking full responsibility? And would he have sacked Angela Rayner as deputy leader if he could have done, which he can't, because that's elected by the members, as I understand it. So let's talk about Labour still. And listen, I'm sorry to sort of bang on about it, but it is the big story. So is Scotland. We'll talk about the future of the union, as Boris Johnson wants to bring all the leaders of the union, including Mark Drakeford, together, all the different nations, to see what they can do to work together as we re-emerge from the pandemic. So those are the stories around politically today. We've got 1 or 2 other bits and bobs to go through as well, and I'll go through the papers in a few minutes' time. But first, to Gareth Knight, LBC's election analyst. Morning to you, Gareth. What would you like to start with? There's plenty of pickings.
Let's start with some good news for Labour, in that they held Sadiq Khan's position as London Mayor, although this was never really in doubt until about 24 hours ago when we were on actually pull off an upset. As we predicted, what actually happened was that people used their first preference, a considerable number of them, towards the Green Party, and when the Green Party dropped out, they transferred to Sadiq Khan, and he ended up winning quite comfortably. So it wasn't really a big surprise, but he has seen a significant drop in his vote, and Sean Bailey did much better than people expected. By far and away the best news for Labour, though, is hidden away in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, where they pulled off a bit of an upset there by winning the mayoral position from the Conservatives. An absolutely amazing result. Nick Johnson, the new mayor of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. And as a previous text message a second ago, Wales, the Labour Party did well there. However, one of the reasons why the Labour Party did well in Wales was because of the collapse of the UKIP vote. They actually didn't do that well against the Conservatives. The Conservatives actually did quite well in Wales. So it's been a bit of a mixed bag. The fallout for the Labour Party, though, is going to be pretty brutal. Certainly the Sunday papers are involved in a lot of speculation. Overall, though, electorally, the incumbents have generally won pretty much in most places, in London, in Wales, in Scotland, and across the UK through Boris. Today, look out for the West Yorkshire mayoralty. Now, this is one people haven't really registered, I don't think, nationally. The reason this is so important is that Tracy Brabin, the MP for Batley and Spen, has promised to stand down from Parliament if she wins. Now, she is expected to win, but Keir Starmer, the last thing he needs right now is a by-election in Batley and Spen. That's a Labour seat, but it's about as Labour as Hartlepool, and it's in Yorkshire. So this is going to be an potentially uncomfortable day for him, because either he is going to lose the West Yorkshire mayoralty, or he's going to be facing another by-election.
About as Labour as Hartlepool. I mean, could you ever have imagined saying this in previous decades? Gareth, thank you very much indeed for that sort of potted look at what has taken place so far. Now, let's just rewind just a little bit. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer reacting to all of these results. This was on Friday.
Well, I'm bitterly disappointed in the results, and I take full responsibility for the results, and I will take full responsibility for fixing things. We have changed as a party, but we haven't set out a strong enough case to the country. Very often we've been talking to ourselves instead of to the country, and we've lost the trust of working people, particularly in places like Hartlepool. I intend to do whatever is necessary to fix that.
And a part of that is to lose Angela Rayner in her role as the national campaigns coordinator and chair of the party. And of course, on the left, that hasn't gone down terribly well. It may not have gone down well in other parts of the party as well. Is he done the right thing? 03456060973. Is this the beginning of a greater purge? We'll see. Lance Price is with us, former special advisor to Tony Blair, who later became director of communications to the Labour Party, coordinating the Labour Party election campaign of 2001, amongst other things. Hello, Lance. Morning.
Andrew, good morning.
Angela Rayner and the relationship between Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner, how can she work constructively with somebody that has clearly scapegoated her in a way, or am I reading this wrong?
Well, I'm not saying you're reading it wrong. I think we've just got a very incomplete picture. I think what's happening is that there's going to be a reshuffle of the front bench of Keir Starmer's team. And for reasons that may be accident, or if they were designed, I think were a big mistake, just one element of that has made it into the media, which is Angela Rayner losing that particular job. I very much hope that Angela Rayner, who I think is a good campaigner, is a good MP, is a good deputy leader, will have a very significant role in the new team. But part of taking responsibility on Keir Starmer's part, unless he was going to sack himself, which, to be fair, I don't think he was ever going to do, and nor should he. He then has to take responsibility for fixing the problem within the Labour Party, getting the Labour Party in better shape to do what he said he wanted to do, which is to present a more positive case to the country.
I could always quote Clive Lewis, and so I will. Norwich South MP, of course. He says the fear is the leader's office is now in headless chicken mode and looking into the void. We need calm and considered, and we got this. It doesn't sound like anybody's getting on very well at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, Clive's a sensible bloke, and he's right about that. And the Labour Party does need to draw breath and not rush into anything too quickly in response to this, because you have to analyse these results and last thing that any party should resort to in the wake of a bad election. And the way in which Angela's position and removal apparently from that role has come out does give that impression. That's a bad thing. So I think what Keir Starmer has to do is, if he's going to do a reshuffle, he probably has to get on with it. Because at the moment it looks like the Labour Party talking about itself and arguing with itself, which is exactly the opposite of what the people want him to do.
Right. What good is a reshuffle going to do if nobody's up to the job and if nobody looks electable? A lot of people talking about the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham now. People are looking sort of elsewhere for future Labour leadership already, and Starmer's only been in the job a year or so. I mean, who is the vote winner in Labour, and what's the vote winning message going into the future as this sort of mild at the moment civil war develops?
Well, there are two different issues there. I mean, there's the personality, and I think that there have been some weaknesses in the shadow cabinet. To be fair to all of them, it's been a really, really tough year for the opposition to get its voice heard on anything very much, because politics and the whole debate in the country has been dominated by the pandemic, and Sir Keir Starmer quite rightly, I think, decided to go for a constructive opposition. It wasn't tearing strips out of the Conservative government day after day, and I don't think the public would have thanked him if he had, and that also goes for some of his team. But he did have, I was going to say relative unknowns, almost complete unknowns in some of the most senior jobs as Shadow Chancellor, Shadow Home Secretary, and I think he probably could bring in people who we are more familiar with and who have got a bit more experience and are better at putting the case. So the other point is positive vision. And again, if he'd unveiled some fantastic policies during the past year, probably they'd have got a bit of coverage. Of course they would, and they would have improved his position. But the first year of in opposition is never the time to set out your stall. If you've got some good ideas, or if we've been on Boris Johnson's like it, just nick them all. So you have to stage it well.
I do remember challenging David Cameron before he was elected the first time, and being very annoyed that he didn't have any policies. I can't think of any policies of Sir Keir Starmer's at the moment. I mean, everyone talks in these general blandisms about vision and about the future and how it's going to look. But actually, you're right. Did he know this was coming? I mean, was this all utterly predictable, and this is now the stick with which to beat the left, and now he can form the party in a manner in which he wants? Is this just part of the transition, Lance?
No, I don't think it is. And I think the results are a mixed bag. As Gareth Ransom was saying earlier, if you look around the whole of the United Kingdom, there are areas where Labour did surprisingly well. And part of the problem that Labour had, and it was a massive, massive problem, and we really shouldn't underestimate the scale of the problem that Labour faced after the 2019 debacle, when they fell to their lowest point since 1935, was winning back people who had completely given up on the Labour Party in the south and west and east of the country, and they've actually done quite well. They've done well in Bristol and the Mayor of the
There's going to be a few people sort of casting askance glances at the radio for that. That is putting a positive spin on things.
What I'm saying is it's a mixed picture. So Labour did well in some areas, they did really badly in others. I'm not trying to discount that in any way at all. And so, but Keir Starmer had a twin job. He had to try to build that. So you can't just win on what we used to call Labour's traditional heartlands. Obviously, that's not a very appropriate phrase anymore. You've got to appeal to the whole country. He's started to appeal to parts of the country that certainly Jeremy Corbyn never could. He's now got a job of showing to people who supported Labour in the past that he's still that Labour is still with them.
I see, momentum, and that various people quoted. I happened to be reading an article in the Guardian yesterday. Various people quoted as saying his actions towards Angela Rayner are all wrong, showing just the type of man he is, blaming somebody else. He's not taking full responsibility. This is the problem, isn't it? On the one hand, you've got some perhaps young, university-educated, urban London and city folk on the one hand, and you've got a more traditional Labour base on the other. How do you bring those factions together, form an opposition, and have a crack at a genuine vote winner in Boris Johnson, no matter what he
does.
Well, the first thing we do is stop thinking of them as factions, because they're not. Labour has only ever won in this country, but it's appealed to both the two groups of people that you've been describing. So aspirational, better off people in the south, educated people in the university towns, metropolitan areas, and reached out into the more deprived and more challenged parts of the country. That's the only path.
Right, well, that's a huge shift back to the centre or to the right, isn't it? For someone, then that's a huge challenge, isn't it? I mean, if that's what is required. I mean, is Sir Keir Starmer the man for the job, briefly, Lance?
It's a monumental challenge. I believe Sir Keir Starmer is the man for the job. He hasn't shown, the Tories have got their mojo. He's got to show he's got his mojo, and we haven't seen that yet. Now's his opportunity.
From bojo to mojo. Ian in Harlow, you'll be next on this. Lance Price, former special advisor to Tony Blair, who later became Director of Comms to the Labour Party. Thank you very much for your time. Always good to speak. We said 17. Ian, you're next. Plus, why aren't these trains running? They've got cracks in them. Who do we sue? We'll deal with that after the news with Philip Christmas.
Sir Keir Starmer has appointed a new strategist to reverse Labour's election-losing streak in England after sacking Angela Rayner as the party's chair and national elections coordinator. Labour Sadiq Khan is pledging to build bridges with central government after being re-elected as Mayor of London in a closer contest than predicted. Nicola Sturgeon says Boris Johnson would be picking a fight with the Scottish people if he tries to stop another independence referendum, despite the SNP falling one seat short of a majority at Holyrood. The weather, cloud and rain across central parts of England, sunshine and showers elsewhere, some heavy in the west, a high of 19 degrees.
LBC Travel, I'm Joanne Webb. The problems on the trains do continue with those safety checks that had to start taking place yesterday. So Great Western Railway aren't running their high-speed trains in and out of Paddington, and London North Eastern Railway service to and from King's Cross is severely disrupted. Nearly all the trains are cancelled, only a handful making it to and from London. Southern services aren't running between Victoria and East Croydon, but that's for engineering works. On the motorways in Berkshire on the M4, the motorway is closed both ways between junctions 8, 9 at Maidenhead and 6 at Slough. That's for the weekend roadworks. And on the Essex stretch of the M25, only one lane is open in both directions at junction 30 at the A13, and that's because a lorry has overturned.
Swarbrick on Sunday, coming up at 10, live from Westminster, LBC.
I'm walking a bit more these days. For those semi-skimmed milk and we're down to the last sheet of kitchen roll type trips. It's not just getting my steps in, it's the other stuff, seeing a bit more of the neighbourhood. Cool buildings, a bit of green space, and the out-of-tune postman. Wherever you're going, there's good in every journey when you bike it or walk it. Download the TfL Go app to find walking and cycling routes. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
That's the soothing sound of a barbershop quartet that have found the better way to buy a quality car from Kazoo. All Kazoo cars pass a thorough 300-point inspection, come with a 90-day warranty, roadside assistance, and a 7-day money-back guarantee. That's one whole week to make sure they love it. Can you buy a quality car that's guaranteed to leave you happy? Kazoo, yeah you can. We're so happy.